emphasizes academic excellence, respect, responsibility, character, and exemplary citizenship. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Let's get into roll call. Mrs. Belisle.
Here.
Mr. Buczkowski.
Here.
Mr. Carlin.
Here.
Mrs. Clinton.
Here.
Mr. O'Brien is absent tonight. Mr. Gears.
Here.
And Ryan Graham is present. For the record, we do have a quorum. We will proceed forward with our agenda tonight. The next item on the agenda is additions to board. I do have one addition, and I will go ahead and motion to approve adding a resolution of MABC under section F, subsection I.
A second.
Any discussion on that motion, board? All right, hearing none. Ms. Belisle, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buczkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Carlin?
Aye.
Mrs. Clinton?
Aye.
Mr. Gears?
Aye.
Ryan Graham votes aye. Are there any other additions to the agenda tonight, board? All right, hearing none, and the rest of the agenda is approved by unanimous consent, and that will move us into our school spotlight for the night. Mr. Carlin, hand it over to you, sir.
All right, thank you. So every month we like to nominate somebody within our Monument Academy community that goes above and beyond to make this school and community a better place. This month we are nominating Deborah Capel as nominated by one of her staff mates. It says that she has excellent instruction in her classroom and holding her students to a high standard. She also contributed by being on several committees such as High Expectation, Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, and Canvas/Grading. Deb has also been integral in our middle school by contributing to our curriculum and mapping finders. Deb has been a teacher member of the SOS team that works with a wide variety of students on creating a positive culture in the school. Deb is always willing to help where there is need and make Monument Academy a great environment for our students and staff. I'm not sure if Deb is here tonight, but we really appreciate all that you do.
Thank you, Mr. Carlin and Mrs. Capel. All right, that moves us into citizen comments pertaining to agenda items. Ms. Clinton? Seeing none, and now we'll move to our consent agenda. Board, the minutes from February 9th have been distributed to you electronically. Are there any corrections or requests for the minutes to be read aloud? Hearing none, the minutes are approved as distributed by unanimous consent. The next item on the consent agenda is the approval of the April 13th meeting date for here at the East Campus, 6 p.m. Are there any objections to April 13th here at East Campus, 6 p.m.? All right, meeting date, time, and location is set by unanimous consent. All right, so at the top of the agenda tonight, board, you'll notice that we're doing some things a little bit differently before getting into our reports of administration and committees. So this project at the West Campus has been over 2 years in the making. And let me just take a moment to introduce kind of the team of people that are a part of this. At the very end, we have Eric Norwood, who is our owner's rep, construction manager with Wilson & Company. He is the one, his team will be overseeing the project at West Campus once construction is underway. Next, we have David Kunstl from Sparks Wilson. He is our legal counsel. He has been with us since the beginning, since commencement of this project, which would have been probably December of 20, going into January of 21, somewhere in there. But Mr. Kunstl has been instrumental in helping us navigate many of the third-party approvals that were needed. As most of you know, we've had a lot of conversations with El Paso County because ultimately they're the ones that have the most input into this project. But I just want to take a moment to recognize him. Next up, we have our Monument Academy Building Corporation Board. Some of you may ask, what is MABC? What is their role in this process? Monument Academy Building Corporation owns the real property, the land that our campus sits on, the M building. And essentially, they are the ones that will be executing many of the documents tonight, and the MA board will be giving consent as well, because this is part of the project that we will be managing. So the MABC board is comprised of, I'll start at the end, Chris Dole, who is a former board member with Monument Academy. We have Mark McWilliams, who was a former board president for Monument Academy. And we also have Joe Wachkowski here tonight, who sits on both boards in a dual role. And that is part of the bylaws with MABC, that one member of the Monument Academy board will be part of the Monument Academy Building Corporation board. So hopefully that gives some context and clarity as to why we have so many people up here tonight at this table. So with that said, we will go ahead and get into the task at hand. And to start tonight, each of you have a binder in proximity to you. Some of you will be sharing a binder, but we'll get into the first item on the agenda tonight under this action is the memorandum of agreement with El Paso County for acquisition of right-of-way and easements. So to give everyone some background to this agreement is the just compensation that MABC will receive for the acquisition of land, the non-exclusive permanent easement, and 2 temporary easements at West Campus. The breakdown of the compensation is identified and itemized with a net total of $89,900. Just so everyone is aware, last year the school did perform its own appraisal, and our appraisal came in less than what the county is offering. So therefore, we are comfortable with this agreement. So with that said, I will open it up for any questions on the MOA. All right, hearing none, then I'm going to make a motion that the MA board consent for the MABC board to execute the memorandum of agreement with El Paso County for acquisition of right-of-way and easements to include the conveyance of parcel agreement RW-5REV, the non-exclusive permanent easement agreement PE-5, the temporary construction easement agreement TE-5REV2, and the temporary construction easement agreement TE-5A. And in your binder board, there's a second on that motion, those 4 parcel agreements are identified, and those will need to be executed as well by the MABC board.
I second.
So Mrs. Clinton has seconded the motion. Is there any further discussion on the MOA or parcel agreements? All right, hearing none. Mrs. Bellata, how do you vote?
Browning.
Mr. Wachkowski?
Aye.
Mrs. Clinton?
Aye.
Mr. Carley?
Aye.
Mr. Gears?
Aye.
And Ryan Graham votes aye. So the motion carries, so we are giving consent to the MABC board. Before the MABC board calls their meeting to order here, we'll go ahead and roll through the rest of these documents just to kind of streamline this process. Okay, so next on the agenda is the general contractor trade agreement with Wildcat Construction. As the board recalls, we received 2 bids for the recirculation project. Because the project is being funded by PPRTA, we are to entertain the lower of the 2 bids. And Wildcat has provided a lower bid, and they are also have provided certain aspects to the bid that we were requesting when we sent this out. So in concert with El Paso County, our legal counsel, and our owner's rep, we are advocating moving forward with Wildcat Construction for approval. This is an agreement as well that the MABC board will be executing tonight. The MA board will not be signing, but what I will do is, if there's no questions, I will make a motion. All right, a motion for the MA board to consent for the MABC board to execute the trade contractor agreement with Wildcat Construction Company Incorporated.
Second.
We have a second on that motion from Mrs. Bellata. Board, any further discussion? Hearing none. Mrs. Bellata, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ryan Graham votes aye. That motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the indemnification agreement with Woodmore Water and Sanitation District. So the purpose of this agreement is to allow for construction of a road over the conservation easement property that Woodmore Water has direct control over. And we have gone through some third-party approvals, and if you'll notice in that agreement, I'm going to read just one of the whereas clauses to give you a little more background to this. Whereas it is reasonable to allow such construction based on the fact that Monument Academy and/or county has determined that the project may affect, but is not likely to adversely affect, the Prebles Meadow Jumping Mouse, and in addition, in a letter dated September 27, 2022, the Monument Academy and/or county received confirmation from U.S. Fish and Wildlife that it concurs with the determination. So the Woodmore Water Board and Sanitation District has already authorized and executed this agreement in open session in one of their board meetings. And tonight, we're here to execute as well. Now, this agreement will be signed by the Monument Academy Board. Are there any questions? All right, I motion that the MA Board approve and ratify the grant of permission to construct an indemnification agreement with Woodmore Water and Sanitation District. You have a second. Is there any further discussion, Board? Hearing none. Mrs. Belisle, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buchkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Carly?
Aye.
Mrs. Clinton?
Aye.
Mr. Deers?
Aye.
And Ryan Graham votes aye. That motion carries. Next, we have the owner-engineer agreement with Wilson and Company. Board, as you're aware, we have already approved the ratification of this agreement. The reason that I have this in the packet tonight is because I've asked Mr. Norwood to be here if there's any questions in regard to that agreement. But we are already in contract with Wilson and Company as our owner's rep / construction manager, excuse me. So if there's any questions tonight, Mr. Norwood, please feel free to ask those questions, and that goes for you as well to the MABC board. Ladies and gentlemen, too easy tonight. All right, and based on the addition of the agenda tonight, we have added in a resolution for the Monument Academy Building Corporation. The purpose of this resolution is for the El Paso County Board of County Commissioners to authorize that the MABC board has the right to execute everything that we have gone through tonight. So that's basically the intent of that resolution. There's really no vote that the MA board needs to take on that. So with that said, that completes the items on our agenda tonight. And at this time, I will yield to you, Mr. Williams, to open your meeting, roll call, of course, and then work through these items for votes.
Okay, thank you very much, and I am way out of practice on doing these. And my meetings were much more chaotic, so I want to thank you for having this really well organized. So this is awesome. Let's just kind of get started. If we can call the meeting to order now for the MABC. I'm Mark McWilliams, President of the Board of MABC, and Chris Dole.
Chris Dole, President, Monument Academy Building Corporation Secretary.
Very good. And Mr. Bukowski?
Yes, Joe Buchkowski, President, member.
Very good, thank you. So the MABC is hereby called to order, and our orders of business are very short and sweet. We have a memorandum of agreement with El Paso County for acquisition of right-of-way and easements that we will vote on and call a full vote on that between the three of us. We only also covering the parcel RWF5 REV agreement, parcel PE5 agreement, parcel TE5 REV2 agreement, parcel TE5A agreement, the trade contractor agreement, and the Wildcat Construction, the indemnification agreement with Woodmore Water and Sanitation District, and the owner-engineer agreement with Wilson and Company, Inc. Have you all had an opportunity to look through those documents?
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Mr. McWilliams, could I add one more to there, and that would be the MABC resolution.
That is that resolution as well, so thank you very much. We will have that resolution also. So may I have a motion, please, for approval, after having all of us read these, for approval of all of these documents, so we can move forward on those.
I motion that the MABC approve the memorandum of agreement with El Paso County for acquisition of right-of-way and easements, parcel RW-5 revision agreement, parcel PE5 agreement, parcel TE5 revision 2 agreement, parcel TE5A agreement, trade contractor agreement with Wildcat Construction, indemnification agreement with Woodmore Water and Sanitation District, and water engineer agreement with Wilson Company, and also the resolution of Monument Academy Building Corporation. Second.
Great. We could have a vote of confidence from all three of us. Crystal, aye.
Joe Michkowski, aye.
Mark McWilliams, aye. Based on the vote for that, I see no issue with us signing these documents here tonight.
Excellent, thank you, gentlemen. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and recess our board for probably about 15 minutes for the purposes of executing these documents with wet signatures and notarization. So at this time, we are in recess.
They said they had a speaker access. Which the Catholic school, the Catholic school, there's also maybe you could send best position of songs. Or all, you know what?
Yeah. Well, that would be, surely there's a, I figured there was a TV somewhere.
It's a weird time. You don't want to sell it, get a separate.
Yeah, I adopted those. Okay. Yeah. You right? I just wanted to make sure.
16 miles. There was one that was going about, they were setting up just wait.
your seats, please. Thank you, everyone, for your patience, and we're going to call this meeting back to order at 6:40 p.m. This time, I'll yield to the MABC Board President, Mr. Williams.
All right, I think we've covered everything. Our attorney said we signed everything, notarized everything, so those contracts are ready to move forward. And we're ready to adjourn the meeting. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion we adjourn the MABC meeting.
In a second?
Second.
All righty, I don't think we need to discuss that. Meeting's adjourned. You all have a good night.
Thank you, gentlemen. So the MABC meeting's adjourned, not the MA meetings, just for clarity.
Oh, made it clear.
Appreciate y'all being here tonight. All right, board, next item on the agenda tonight is the reports of admin and committees. And we will start tonight with Mrs. McClellan for our Chief Operating Officer report.
All right, thank you so much. So this past week, I sent out a communication to the school community with updates on what I call the latest and greatest. So I hope that everyone has had a chance to read this communication. I'd like to provide, from now on, I'll be providing some monthly updates on the first Monday of every month, highlighting some of the work that and completed dates, important dates that are coming up, highlighting an area of operations or educational ideas to clarify for the community to consider what seems worth highlighting. So it won't just have, it may have a staff spotlight, or it may have maybe tips and tricks for things during a break, during a spring break coming up, or things like that. So there's lots of different educational items that can be highlighted that are helpful for all community members. So I'm hoping that not only with my latest and greatest, but then highlighting some work that needs to be highlighted. And maybe even to clarify things that are going on. Like maybe we talked about discipline, we talked about maybe some things that the strategic planning committee is doing, but just really highlighting different areas of our operations. And then since our last board meeting, I have been working on areas of our current year's budget related to the school bond compliance and audit presented tonight by Mr. Gustafson. And our team has begun work on the development of the 23-24 school year budget, and looking forward to our budget work session next week. No, not next week, sorry, the 21st. And this has taken a lot of work, I will say. I'm sure Glenn, we've had multiple meetings with admin. I know that the admin has had meetings with Mr. Gustafson to go over the school finance and kind of explaining all the school codes and giving clarity on that, and I know that they really appreciated that. Thank you, Glenn. And then as we enter our next chapter of Mindman Academy, we reflect on the lessons learned so we can continue to build on our strengths and make the necessary shifts to realize our mission for the MA students and families fully. As one of the administrators recently described to me, Monument Academy's strength is that the school has been consistently the same for a long stretch of time. But when I heard this statement, it is essential to recognize that being the same for a long stretch of time in some areas is very valuable. But in areas, staying the same all the time can be a detriment if not considering continuous improvement. So, a strategic plan is valuable to any organization, and we've been thick in the strategic planning process just recently. The last meeting, the committee reviewed the provided data that covered various data points. We did a SWOT analysis as a team and finished as individual work. So we didn't get a chance to finish all of it, so the team got homework. One proposed and discussed area was simplifying the current mission and vision statements and creating a motto summarizing Monument Academy's identity as one MA. The group recognized the hard work that the MA community members put into the current mission and vision statement in the past, which should be noted as still being the same. However, the committee recognized that both statements could be simplified. The statements are proposed, I repeat, proposed, to be simplified but not finalized yet. The work completed in the last meeting guides the next step, setting strategic goals. So in our next meeting tomorrow, actually, these goals are the focus of the committee's next meeting tomorrow. So now that we have the SWOT analysis, we'll be working on the next piece of the goals. We'll also be revisiting the communication that we had about the mission and vision statements. Last, I attended the Colorado League of Charter Schools conference last week, and with Mr. Graham, Mrs. Clinton, and Mr. Kensington. We networked with other charter leaders and learned some of the new valuable information that's out there. I always enjoy networking with other charter leaders and hearing their similarities that they have with us. As we sat around different tables at lunch, we were able to network with one another during, there was a cocktail hour, and you got to meet lots of different people from different communities and different charters and different vendors. And so it is a nice time. I know Mr. Graham and Mrs. Clinton and I got to speak with people from Liberty Commons. And so that's the one thing I've always enjoyed with the Colorado League of Charter Schools Conference is the networking opportunities that we have there. And it really gave me another understanding of how important the charter community is and how we band together to have that continuous improvement and show that we are an amazing community. So that is all I have.
Thank you, Mrs. McLeod. Board, any questions? I would also like to thank our principals for the reports that you guys put together. I know we don't read those aloud, they do go out to the community, but I always enjoy reading those and getting an understanding from your lens of what's going on. So thank you guys for continuing to do that. Next up on our committee reports is our CFO consultant, Mr. Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to keep my report brief tonight since we have the audit. As Kim mentioned, we've been spending a lot of time getting things done with the audit. We were very grateful to finish by the deadline and get all of our data uploaded to the state and Lewis Palmer School District in a timely manner. And we will be posting that audit on the district's website in accordance with state statute after the meeting. So we'll get that done. We have finished the January financial statements, so we're catching up more and more every day. February is in progress, and as Kim mentioned, we've already started modeling different scenarios with the senior staff at the schools in terms of what next year's budget will look like. There is a document in your board packet that basically ties to the audit on a school-by-school basis, so you might find that really helpful to see exactly how each school fared and what its ending balance is as of June 30 of 22, which is really important for our bond compliance. So that helps also give us a clean starting point for fiscal year 22-23. So we're really starting to catch up and make progress now. And with that, I'll stop. And if there's any questions, be glad to answer those.
Thank you, sir. Right, that'll move us into our board committee reports. Highway 105, I would love to say no report, but I'll just give you a quick update on kind of the status from here. Now that we have executed on all these agreements, the hope, the intent would be that Wildcat will be able to start sometime in May on the project. That is why we've been trying to get this on the agenda for probably the last 2 months, but there's just been a lot of back and forth on different approvals. So that said, if all goes well, we start in May. This could be potentially a 3 to 4 month project, and this will be for the phase 1 portion at the West Campus, which will be the road that will be carved in behind the school. And then in the future, to be determined a date, will be the phase 2, which would end up being the expansion of Highway 105, which would also add a roundabout to Millwood and Village Ridge Point, and basically create a wall. So what we did tonight with those documents is there's a very small piece of land that now we have authorized the purchase purchase of from the county, and that piece of land will be where the expansion of Highway 105 will move on to. So that's all I have for Highway 105. Next up, Mrs. Belisle for curriculum.
Thank you. Let's see, the curriculum committee met last week and it was a packed agenda. There's lots going on with curriculum at Monument Academy, headed up by our Director of Academics, Mrs. Tina Leone. And we first heard at the committee meeting from Mr. Kennington, and he presented to the group about exciting things with our first graduating class next year at the high school. And he and his committee are working on a senior capstone and getting all of those pieces put together so that our seniors can have that project and then graduate with that. He explained that it's very gelatinous right now, just in the beginning stages of planning it, but he presented that it would essentially be the culmination of what classical education should be, and a project that will exhibit the true, the good, and the beautiful. Then we heard from the teachers there at the committee meeting. They were tasked to go back to their teams, take a look at the 2023 core knowledge curriculum updates and kind of compare and contrast as to, what these updates might mean for what we're teaching now versus what might come down the pike with the updates, and lots of discussion around that, a packed conversation. So more to come on that, definitely, because we did run out of time at this meeting and had to dismiss. So lots of conversation, lots going on there. Mrs. Leone did conduct a survey of all of our teachers at the West and East campus about their use of technology, and basically trying to ascertain what is our educational philosophy as an entire school when it comes to our students and how they use technology. So she's trying to gather that information. The results came back, and again, we ran out of time for all of the discussion and kind of making action steps. That was missed because time was of the essence. So just wanted the board to know, our community to know, that that is an area of focus for the curriculum committee, and more to come on that as well. She also gave us a draft of the new curriculum adoption policy and tasked all of us members to take a look at that, take that home, a little homework, and then bring back our thoughts and suggestions. And again, that is a policy that I know as a board I've discussed here before that we are interested in the school to have something like that, so that when we do adopt a curriculum, there is a careful review process in place where the parents have time to look that over, to provide feedback, a window of time in the process when we adopt new curriculum, and then also, of course, to have board approval written into that policy as well. So that is in the works, as well as a supplemental curriculum policy when they add things outside of our official adopted curriculum. So all of that is busy time, and Mrs. Leone is doing a great job guiding us there. In previous reports, I talked about math curriculum, and that was the subject of previous committees. The math curriculum subcommittee was formed. They continue to meet. And the update on that is, I believe in the past in my reports that getting a new math curriculum was a sense of urgency for next academic school year, and that is no longer the case, but the math curriculum subcommittee does continue to meet because those types of things are on our radar for not the next academic year, but in the future. So it is good that they are exploring things to bring things back to our committee so we can talk about that. But again, we did not get to that in this committee meeting last week because we ran out of time, but that subcommittee continues to meet. I'm repeating myself there. That's all. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Belisle. Any questions from the board? Go ahead, hearing none, and we'll move to Mr. Gears for SAC West.
Thank you, Ryan. SAC West was scheduled to meet Tuesday, March 7th. However, due to some conflicting schedules, was not able to get quorum, so the meeting was not convened. However, tasks from previous meetings are still on the table, and the committee will continue to work and be ready to go for next meeting. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. And back to you, Mrs. Belial, for SAC use.
Thank you. Okay, so ESAC met yesterday here at East Campus, and it was a middle school heavy agenda. Mr. Kennington popped in at the last minute. He had a conflict about SAT meetings, so he came in to say hi, but we concentrated mostly on the subject of middle school, and Mr. Machado gave us a wonderful in-depth presentation on NWEA and the mid-year math and WEA tests that our middle school students just took. He walked us through the whole thing. It was super informative, so I encourage you to learn about that more and reach out and get your questions asked about that testing. Anyway, the NWEA testing was conducted for all middle school students for math only. And back to what I was talking about with math curriculum, part of the reason for that NWEA mid-year testing was to kind of root out the challenges in our math and our math results with our kids and figure out if it was a curriculum issue. That's part of what that data gives the school, is to learn how we can react to those results and then how we can meet our kids' needs. And so that's one of the reasons why the math curriculum is not such an urgency for next academic year, because the NWEA results for the math testing mid-year showed some other things, and it was more about some improvement areas that we can make with instruction. So I believe, if I'm correct, Mr. Machado, we're going to stay the course with our current curriculum for the next academic school year with our math curriculum in middle school. Another thing to note for the community and for parents, this was something I learned, is that if you would like to see your individual students' NWEA results, it's always on Infinite Campus. So log on to your kids' Infinite Campus and you can see the results. And finally, there will be plans going forward, and this dovetails into what Mrs. McClelland has been talking to us about in her State of the School update. Our strategic planning is more data for our school, so we can have those dashboarding so we're not driving blind. And Mr. Machado echoed that in his presentation as well, and that moving forward, we will increase NWEA testing for our middle school and do core subject testing in NWA at the beginning of the year, mid-year, and end of year. And then we really have that data to be able to pivot to, not waste an entire, second part of the year on a direction that maybe wasn't as helpful, and that data really informs which way we're driving the car, so to speak. So that was interesting as well. And thank you to Mr. Machado for all the work he put into that. It was a great presentation and really informative. Oh, last thing, we did have one of the parents ask if the school-wide results, obviously keeping kids' individual scores confidential, could be posted somewhere, and he plans to do that too, so look for that in a communication. And I think that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Belial. Mr. Wachowski, governance.
No report.
And finance for you as well.
No report.
And we'll skip buildings and facilities with Mr. O'Brien, and then we'll into volunteer, Mrs. Clinton.
So we continue to get teachers contacting the volunteer committee with needs such as the upcoming book fair at West Campus and the recent dances that were held here. And so it's nice to see that resource being used. Melody is here tonight. She does a lot of work for us on Track It Forward. And we are sitting at around 3,585 hours that have been logged from 288 volunteers. So a lot of really great work is being done, and I just really appreciate that. Thank you, Melody.
Thank you, Mrs. Clinton. And Mr. Carley, RDC committee to you.
So RDC meeting met a couple weeks ago, and we actually started our filming today for our MA commercial kind of infogram. Lindsay kicked us off with a great filming session this morning, as we're looking to get into the school now to do some additional filming to really show the community, show our parents how great MA is and what our vision is, and where this fundraising Jake and Kendra have been doing an awesome job as far as raising money. Currently, we have about $75,000 for the Links Fund, an additional $23,000 if you include the gala. Very generous from our parents so far, and we're excited to continue to fundraise for our goals and share with this community how great MA is and where the money is headed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlin. All right, that completes reports of admin and committees. That will move us into items requiring board discussion and action. First on the agenda will be the fiscal year 21-22 annual financial audit. Mr. Gustafson, could I have you tee this up and introduce the gentleman that will be presenting tonight?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. While we get Mr. John Paul Chevalier, I'm not exactly sure how he pronounces it, with Clifton Larson and Associates online. All school districts and charter schools are required under state statute to undergo an independent financial audit every year. That also includes the single audit of grants. In our case, we don't actually qualify for the single audit, but many school districts do. Clifton Larson has just finished their work and has submitted it. We were able to submit that by the deadline of March 1st to the school district in the state of Colorado. And we have included some financial analysis in the board packet for the board members to understand and better understand how we came out. And with that, I think it would be a good time to cue up John Paul.
Going with that. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Is that a yes? Yes. All right, great. Again, my name is John Paul Le Chevalier. Pleased to be speaking with you tonight on the annual financial statement audit for Monument Academy. If I'm able to, I'll share my screen so we can look through some of the documents. My intent is to, and hopefully you're able to see some of that. I realize it's probably small on the screen, but I'll kind of talk through what's on the screen. It just helps if you can follow along. My intent is to be pretty high level. The financial statements themselves are about 16 pages, so don't plan on reading all of that to you, but if there are any questions, comments, things that you'd like to discuss further, please feel free to interrupt. I'd be happy to spend a little bit more time on any area within the financial statements or audit reports or recommendations. So to start off, we have our independent auditor's report, which is at the very beginning of the annual financial statements. This is an unmodified opinion, and so that's informally referred to as a clean audit opinion. And so we're just kind of kicking things off. That is the highest level of audit report that Monument Academy can receive, and it's really the level of audit report that Monument Academy should be expecting to receive each year. And so, again, pleased to be able to present that Monument Academy did receive that clean audit opinion. Moving to the actual financial statements, if you've been around government financial statements before, been on the board for a couple of years, you may be familiar, but as a quick note, the Monument Academy, as well as every public charter school or school district, does present essentially two sets of financial statements. The first set of financial statements is more of a long-term, kind of big picture view of the financial position of Monument Academy. The second set of financial statements is more of a current, kind of one-year focused set of financials. And that second set is really going to focus more and kind of mirror what is going to be budgeted for each year. And so that is a very important set of financials. Most of the time, that kind of budgetary, one-year, current focused set of financials is what will be presented on a regular basis. And that long-term, big picture view is generally just once a year. You might get snippets of that throughout the year, but normally the annual financial statement audit would be the only time that you'd see kind of all of that put together. So this first set of financial statements does show that the one's titled the Statement of Net Position. That is that long-term view. The key items that are different there are going to be the capital assets, primarily meaning the school buildings, the long-term debt, so the bonds that Monument Academy has, as well as the net pension liability and net OPEB liability, which relates to the unfunded portion of Colorado PARA. And so that's if you took all of the contributions to PARA for 1 year and Monument Academy's tiny fraction of a percentage for that, that's what the net pension liability and net OPEB liability would relate to. OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. That's a healthcare subsidy that PARA retirees receive. So it really, you can kind of mentally group those two together, but according to government accounting standards, that is required to be presented separately. So that's what that relates to, but any of the pension or OPEB items on there, you can kind of look at them together. If you look at the second statement, the statement of activities, you'll see down towards the bottom this change in net position of about 2.6 million. That means that the Monument Academy's overall financial position strengthened by about 2.6 million. So in a better overall big picture financial position than previously. But what should be kind of noted is that a lot of times the pension information is a very significant part of what gets presented on that long-term view. And so if we look at some of the reconciling items as you get to the long-term view, you'll see that about 3.8 million of that increase related to PARA. So while there was a strengthening overall, the majority of that, and really more than the entire increase, related to the increase for pensions. And so that is something to keep in mind. Then looking at the current set of financial statements, so kind of this closer to a budget view, you'll see we'll look at the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. This is shown by fund, and so the building corporation and foundation are presented within separate columns. I know earlier in the meeting there was some discussion about the building corporation, so that the financial information for that entity does get rolled up into Monument Academy's financial statements based on the relationship between the two. It should also be noted that the foundation fund is actually very similar to the building corporation in that it was used to issue debt for the acquisition construction of the high school, so that's not really a true foundation receiving donations or contributions. It's really more of kind of a second building corporation. Looking at the net change in fund balance, this would be kind of your net income or loss, if you will. If you're looking at a private company's financial statements, and so you'll see overall there was a decrease in the fund balance, or essentially a net loss for fiscal year June 30th, 2022, of about $830,000. The majority of that relating to the decrease in the fund balance for the foundation fund, which is relating to making the principal and interest payments on the high school building bonds. Then there was also a slight loss in the general fund, with still an ending fund balance or reserve of just shy of 2.4 million. So that was about all I was going to go into the actual financial statements, unless there's any questions, comments, or concerns. Otherwise, next up will be some of the recommendations that we had as part of the audit. Okay, hearing none. Moving to one of the other items provided is referred to as the internal control communication, and this really outlines all of our information relating to recommendations, audit findings, areas for improvement, best practice recommendations, those types of things. So this communication includes all of that. The first item is for segregation of duties. This means that ideally an entity would have different people involved in different parts of the financial process so that not one person has too much control over custody, reporting for all of the financial processes. So based on the size of Monument Academy, that's not possible really to have ideal segregation of duties. So overall, we see that at least for fiscal year 2022, the school did have probably pretty close to as good of segregation of duties and internal controls as a small charter school could have, but did want to just point out some of the areas where there are segregation of duties issues, meaning that one person would have more control than they ideally should, and that's something that the board should be aware of when reviewing financial information. The board is a key control over making sure that the school is headed in the right direction, and so just want to emphasize the board's role in oversight over Monument Academy. Obviously, that's in flux with the departure of Mark, but something that would be continued to be reviewed during the audit each year. The next couple of items relate to adjustments that were posted as part of the audit. This first item, and for the most part, these first two relate to the timing of when things are reported. So not necessarily that something was reported incorrectly, but that was reported within an incorrect year. So for unavailable revenue, there's a concept, as I discussed, with that kind of short-term or budget focus versus the long-term view. This unavailable revenue is the concept that revenues received beyond 2 months after year end are really far enough away from being received that they're not considered part of that current view, and so they'd be recognized on the full like that big picture view, but not on the budgetary view. And so it gets moved out of revenue and into unavailable revenue. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. It's not the easiest concept to grasp and getting, kind of deep into governmental accounting, but did want to explain what that relates to is that the ESSER funding that Monument Academy will be receiving of about $600,000 was sitting as owed from the district relating to costs that Monument Academy incurred within fiscal year 2022. Those were not reimbursed within 60 days. And therefore, when we were reviewing as part of the audit, we moved that out of revenue and into this unavailable revenue line on the financial statements. And then in 2023, when the funds are received, that'll go into revenue, and you'll be seeing that in next year's financial statements. The other item on here is accounts payable, which relates to the concept of the school purchasing or having some good or service received prior to the end of the year, but then not paid until after the end of the year. And so we had noted that about 80,000 of those payables weren't properly reversed from the 2021 financials, and so that resulted in double counting expenditures when the payment was made during fiscal year 2022. And so we had an adjustment to reduce the payable and expenditure balances for that. The next item relates to reconciliation between the district and Monument Academy. We actually had a similar recommendation for the district, and this is really the district passes through amounts Monument Academy for a variety of things. That's both revenues and expenses. And that comes through as one net amount to Monument Academy. And we've noted that not everything was being recorded properly as it was coming from the district to Monument Academy. And so we recommend that Monument Academy and Lewis Palmer School District regularly coordinate and reconcile to make sure that what the district is sending over is the correct amount and also properly reflected both by Monument Academy and by the district. Then the last recommendation that we had was we did note that as part of the budgets for the preschool fund and pupil activity fund, there's a requirement within Colorado budget law that the board approve appropriations not exceed, the actual expenditures incurred by the school not exceed the board approved appropriations, meaning that the school, in this instance, spent more than what was approved within the budget by the board. And so for the preschool fund, that was only by $935, so overall not a very significant amount. And then the pupil activity fund, I realize that can be a bit harder to budget for, as that normally is based on what activities happen during the year. But Colorado budget law does say that this is applicable to every fund of the school, and so that would be something where it potentially would be non-compliance with Colorado budget law. So did want to point that out, though again, not overly material amounts, but did want to mention that. So those were all of the recommendations that we had. I guess I'll pause again if there's any questions or comments related to those items.
No questions.
Great, and then the last item, and I'll go through this one really quickly, is called our governance communication. This just outlines, as auditors, we're required to communicate a number of items as part of the audit, and so this letter is kind of a bullet point of everything that we're required to communicate. Most of this is pretty templated, and so we're required to say it, we're saying it, though most of the time it looks very similar each year. I'll highlight just a couple of things that are unique to this year. Monument Academy did implement what's referred to as GASB Statement number 87 relating to leases, and so this did change how leases are accounted for. If you look at the financial statements, you'll see that there is a new lease asset as well as a lease liability. The biggest part of that relates to copiers that the school leases, not an overly significant amount in the grand scheme of the overall financial position, but did just want to point out that that is new for this year. We do also have a list of basically what we just went through in the recommendations. Those are included within the uncorrected misstatements and corrected misstatements areas. So all of the adjustments that we had then translate into the recommendations that we just went through. And then also attached to this letter is what we refer to as a representation letter, and this just indicates that it's signed by management of Monument Academy and would indicate that everything that we asked for was provided to us as part of the audit, that the financial statements they believe are presented fairly and accurately, et cetera. And so that's really kind of showing that the audit is a bit of a collaborative process with making sure that everything in there is accurate and correct. So those are kind of all of the communication and items that I had. Again, I'll pause just one more time if there's any other kind of questions or comments.
No questions.
All right, well, I appreciate, again, I appreciate Glenn kind of taking things to the finish line at the end of the audit, even though it wasn't, there for any part of the year, but I appreciate kind of all of his efforts in coordinating the last bit of it, and appreciate the time this evening to present. Thank you.
Thanks.
I was never worried, Greg.
Well, Mr. Gustafson, thank you for getting that set up. Obviously, there's some stuff some takeaways, and I know you've been diligently working on correcting some of this stuff, so do you have anything you would like to add?
I'll just wrap up if I could that Clifton Larson talked a lot about the management letter, the internal control concerns, which, by the way, Kim and I have a Standard & Poor's conference rating call tomorrow on the bonds, and they're asking the same questions. What are we going to do about that? It's really hard in a small organization to segregate duties. We'll work on that. That's definitely on our radar. That as we can move forward, we'll figure out ways to do that. But I was hoping maybe to jump on with a little bit about the financial results more than the management letter in terms of how we did and where we came out. But we can talk about that later. I think the document that I prepared provides a good summary of that because the audit is heavy. It's hard to read for a lot of people. So I hope that document will help people see exactly how it came out. And that's in the board packet.
Great, thank you, sir. Board, any questions for Mr. Gustafson? All right, hearing none, that'll move us to our next item on the agenda, and part of with Mark's resignation, we're cleaning up bank accounts. So the next item will be the board signature resolution for Integrity Bank. And I will go ahead and read this aloud. So before I do that, the bank just requests some form of resolution authorizing the change of individuals that are allowed to sign on the accounts. And so we have removed, individuals like Mark Brockhurst, of course, and others that are no longer a part of the school. So with that said, I'll read the resolution aloud. Whereas Monument Academy desires to update its Integrity bank account, authorized signatures, and whereas current signatures are essential to provide appropriate internal controls, and whereas the board of directors desires to update the authorized signatures for staff currently serving in the appropriate financial oversight roles. Now therefore be it resolved that the board of directors of Monument Academy do hereby approve the following list of authorized signatures for the Integrity Bank accounts. Board President Ryan Graham, Board Treasurer Joseph Buchkowski, Interim Chief Financial Officer Glenn Gustafson, Interim Business Manager Maureen Hilborn.
Second.
Is there any discussion on that resolution, board?
Ryan, one quick question. Ryan, one quick question. Not related to this specific resolution, but this time deposit. Can you remind me again when this one?
Are you speaking of a certificate of deposit?
Yeah.
So we authorized that resolution at our last board meeting to change the signatures on that. And the next resolution is actually for a certificate of deposit that we have with First National Bank that we're making sure that we have the proper individuals on that account as well.
Okay, excellent. Now, can you remind me of the maturity dates of both the Integrity Bank one and the First National Bank?
Yep. So the Integrity Bank one, and Mr. Gustafson, correct me if I'm wrong, I think is in the next 60 days. And then the First National Bank certificate of deposit, I don't have the exact date, but I believe it's October, November of this year.
Yeah, it's almost a year from now.
Okay, thank you, Ryan.
Absolutely. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. Mrs. Belisle, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buchkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Carlin?
Aye.
Mrs. Clinton?
Aye.
Mr. Beers? Aye. Ryan Graham votes aye. That motion carries. This resolution passes. That will move us to our next item, which is another resolution for the First National Bank, and I'll go ahead and read this aloud. Whereas Monument Academy desires to update its First National Bank of Monument certificate of deposit authorized signatures, and whereas current signatures are essential to provide appropriate internal controls, and whereas the Board of Directors desires to update the authorized signatures for staff currently serving in the appropriate financial oversight roles. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Directors of Monument Academy do hereby approve the following list of authorized signatures for the Integrity Bank. Excuse me, that should be a correction on there. For the First National Bank of Monument certificate of deposit, and respectfully ask that the previous signers who are no longer affiliated with the school be promptly removed. Board President Ryan Graham, Board Treasurer Joseph Wichkowski, Interim Chief Financial Officer Glenn Gustafson, Interim Business Manager Maureen Hilborn.
Second.
Any discussion on this resolution for the certificate of deposit for First National Bank of Monument? All right, hearing none, Mrs. Belial, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Wichkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Carly? Aye. Mrs. Clinton?
Aye.
Mr. Gears? Aye. Ryan Graham votes aye. So at this point, with that motion carrying, the board secretary and I will go ahead and ratify both of these resolutions, and we will get these to Mr. Gustafson, who will get those to the appropriate controls at each bank, and we will have those signatures updated. So that completes our items required on board discussion and action, and that will move us into board comments and announcements. I'll yield to you, Mrs. Clinton.
So a reminder that we are we have an open application process right now for the Board of Directors election. We have 2 seats that we will be filling. As of right now, we actually have 2 applicants, and they're both here this evening. We have Matt Ross, who's here, and Mr. Graham has put in an application for a second term. So anyone else that's wanting to put in an application at this point, you have until March 31st to do so, and that information has gone out in the weekly newsletters and on the parent Facebook pages, so please keep an eye out for that if you're thinking about putting in for a board seat. The next thing is we have a reminder board that we have a work session, a budget work session coming up March 21st at 9 a.m. Mr. Graham, do you know the location on that? Or is that TBD?
I was relying on you to set that up.
Okay, well, I say I will get that information posted once I have it.
No, in all seriousness, I don't know if we have a location yet. I know that's going to be, that's over spring break, correct? It's not?
No,
Okay.
it's the week before.
Would we have access to a classroom at one of the campuses?
West Campus we were talking about.
That's
21st.
so Tuesday. So that room 307? Okay, so
So if you
board
want
work
to do that,
session,
so-
March 21st, 9 a.m., room 307 at the West Campus.
And that is the work session that will be for budget purposes.
And then my final board announcement is on March 15th coming up. There's a board parent cafe chat, and Mr. Graham and Mr. Carly will be there, as well as special guest Ms. McClellan. There is a link that has gone out for that as well, for anyone that is available to RSVP in advance. You do not have to. You can show up. It's at Serrano's in the closed meeting room that's there. It's just a great opportunity to get to know your board members well and get to know Mrs. McClelland, and we've had really great turnout at these. It's been really fun. And that is all I have, Mr. Graham.
Thank you kindly. That will move us into any new business we call for next meeting. All right, hearing none, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session. If somebody would like to make that motion and read the citation.
I will do that, but I wanted to say really quickly, thank you to Mr. Graham. All of these binders, this work on Highway 105, kind of the culmination of all of that tonight. 2 years of really hard work, of basically a second full-time job. And I know a lot of other people had a lot to do with that as well. Won't go on and on, but thank you, Mr. Graham. And I move we adjourn to executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, 4B, D, and E to receive legal advice on specific legal matters, to discuss specialized details of security arrangements, and for negotiations and advice to negotiators regarding COO contract. I second.
Any discussion, board? Hearing none, Ms. Belisle, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Wachowski? Aye. Mr. Carley? Mrs. Clinton?
Aye.
Mr. Gears? Aye. Ryan Graham votes aye. We will adjourn into executive session. To those of you that are here, we'll resign ourselves to a conference room. You're welcome to stay. Just to tee this up in proper context, this may be a long executive session. So, but thank you, guys. Good evening to those of you that have stayed. Thank you. We are adjourned from executive session. We are now back in open session. It is 10:23. We do have one action item tonight that I'm going to yield to Mr. Carley, and he will be reading a motion.
I move to approve interim COO Kim McClellan's contract for the next fiscal school year, subject to contract negotiations.
Second.
Mr. Wachowski has seconded that motion. It opens up for further discussion. All right, hearing none. Mrs. Belisle, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Wachowski? Aye. Mr. Carley?
Aye.
Mrs. Clinton?
Aye.
Mr. Gears? Aye. Ryan Graham votes aye. That motion carries unanimously. That will complete our items of action for after executive session. At this time, I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting. And Mrs. Clinton, for the record, do we have any public comments not pertaining to agenda items?
We do not.
And we are dismissed. Thank you.
Can I ask a question to clarify? So are we continuing her contract as an interim COO for the next school year? So she'll still be interim, but for the next school year?
Yes, ma'am.
That's what I thought I got. Okay, thank you.
Where's my...